All right, I'll get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Julia. I'm the panel moderator today. It's great to see everyone. Thank you for being here. It's nice to see so many faces and super excited to be the moderator and host these four wonderful panelists. To begin with, I'll give an outline of our hour together, a quick introduction of myself, and then hand it over to the panelists to introduce themselves and start our discussion. Just to outline for the hour, we'll have introductions and then 30 minutes of talking, and then 15 minutes of Q&A. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time during the hour. Like I said, I'm Julia. I'm Julia Plowman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Catalyst Law, and I'm all about transformation. And 15 years ago, I had a vision to help create a world where there was no wall between nonprofits and corporations. And I wanted corporations to do more good in the world, and I wanted nonprofits to be more result-oriented. And then fast forward 15 years, today we call this purpose. And we see social entrepreneurs working at for-profits and at nonprofits. And it's super, super wonderful, super cool to see this happening in the world and this convergence of work. And our panelists are all social entrepreneurs, 2 lead purpose-driven for-profits and 2 lead ambitious nonprofits. So with that, I am going to hand it over to the panelists to introduce themselves. And let's start with Kate.
Sorry, I had put myself on mute because my dog was crying. So, but here I am. So I'm Kate Kilberg. I am one of the partners and co-founders of Catalyst Law. And one of the things that inspired me to get interested in social enterprise was nonprofit law has always been one of my specialties. And I spent most of my career kind of working as a legal advisor to nonprofits. And, you know, as I got more mature in my career, I got really interested in social enterprise, kind of as an academic discipline. And the line between nonprofit and for-profit and the law makes a big distinction between those different types of businesses. And so, you know, that was sort of my academic interest. And then as I realized, as I kind of got thinking about it, I really realized that I think social enterprise is sort of like philanthropy 2.0, that's kind of the next step is how do we meld these 2 ideas back together? And so that was always sort of my academic interest. And then so when I had an opportunity to start a law firm, it was a social enterprise. So we have Catalyst, which is the for-profit side. And then we also have a nonprofit called the Commons Law Center that works with income qualified folks to provide legal services. So that's sort of my background. It started as an academic interest and then turned into a business.
Great, thank you, Kate. Kali, you're up.
My name is Kali Thorne. I'm co-founder and executive director of Kairospdx, and Kairos is an organization focused on education transformation, and I would say I entered this space because my career has been in education, and I think we have a situation where children are not thriving in schools, particularly Black and brown children. And I felt that in order to get different results, things had to be different and feel different and look different than what we currently see. And so I think entrepreneurship and innovation is especially needed in the educational sector, where we see sort of an intractable way of doing things that hasn't changed for over a century. And recognizing that schools as they are currently run were not intended to serve the diverse populations they currently serve. It sort of warrants us to take a step back and think about how do we do things differently? How do we think outside the box to fully support children? And how do we not just limit our thinking to their academic success, but truly focus on the whole child and children flourishing and thriving? And I think it's been to our detriment that we've only focused on math and literacy test scores and not on children being empathetic and curious and all of the things that actually create great leaders and entrepreneurs. So I have been at it for the last 9 years, and my career prior to Kairos was working in policy and government, as well as in schools, directly serving children. So it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thanks. Liz.
Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Bohannon. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a socially conscious fashion brand based here in Portland called Sseko Designs. We started out really with the intention of using our business to create community and opportunity for really high potential female scholars in East Africa. So women who are testing into college, but due to a variety of factors, don't have the economic support to make a university education happen. And so that's kind of how we started. And 10 years later, that is still what we're doing. So we have now, I guess you can say, global fashion brand. We work with fair trade partners in Uganda, Ethiopia, India, Kenya, Peru, really all over the world, using principles of fair trade business to create fair and dignified jobs, and then also to contribute to the flourishing of female scholars all across the globe. The fashion industry is a pretty dirty place as it relates to both from a sustainability perspective and then also just from a labor rights perspective. So less than 2% of the world's garment workers actually earn a living wage. And yet it's something that literally every single one of us interact with every single day. And so, yeah, we deeply believe that by connecting the consumer to the producer in a really meaningful and authentic way, that's part of how we change how people think about how they spend, how they vote with their dollars in their closets. And that's what gets us up in the morning.
Thanks. Great. Nita.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Julia and Catalyst, for inviting MESO to participate in this and to be recognized as a social issues nonprofit, and how MESO is doing what it's doing to change the world and make it a little better place. So MESO started I'm Nita Shah. I'm the outgoing executive director. I have another week left at MESO. I've been with MESO for 16 years. Kobe Lewis is going to be joining MESO as our new executive director. MESO started in 2005 with the new development that was happening in Northeast Portland. Many of the businesses that had been there for a very long time, and these were mostly minority-owned businesses, were starting to move away from there because they could not afford the higher rents. MESO was started with the hope to make these businesses stay in the neighborhood. And we started providing technical assistance and access to capital to these businesses to stay there. We were very successful in the initial 2 years, and we thought we would be doing this for 2 years, but we are still here today, much more established and much more sustainable, but have always stayed true to our mission, which is to help under-resourced and historically marginalized communities, to provide them business technical assistance and access to capital to grow their businesses. So my passion, I think, comes from me being an immigrant, and this is all I could do to support my family's small businesses. And I've seen that really multiplied many, many times over the last 16 years at MESO.
Great. Well, thank you all. So I'm going to get started with our first question to the panelists. And our idea is to be real, be truthful, be vulnerable, be inspiring. And our first question is, what is the problem you wake up to every morning? Kali, would you like to start?
Let me just say, I hope we do different orders.
I will, I promise.
I feel great about it. You can always go first.
I'm going to keep you all on your toes. I'll change it every time.
I mean, honestly, the problem that I wake up to every day is racism and just being in the skin that I'm in. Of course, I deal with gender issues as a woman, but being Black really defines my life experience and has from, you know, a very young age. And the work that I do to serve Black and brown children, the reality of racism and how pervasive it is in our society and our systemic structures is something that I have to contend with. We run a school at Kairos, so we serve directly almost 250 children, and with them is you know, close to 500 adults that they're connected to, and we do a lot of policy work. I'm sorry, I've got kids in my own house, so you're hearing background noise of them. But I do a lot of policy work at the state level and local level, focusing on breaking down the systemic structures that impede Black and brown children from thriving in schools. And I think, you know, this week of all weeks has been a very intense week with the trial and the verdict of Derek Chauvin, and at the same time, a 15-year-old girl getting shot. And I think for me, it's the constant wondering of how my work can lean into this next generation of children, because I think it's hard to break down systems that exist, and it's hard to change mindsets when you're dealing with adults, but children are not born racist. Children are not born otherizing people or dehumanizing people to the degree that we see it happening at the system level. So what is it that I can do and the work that I do to help cultivate this next generation of leaders to think and be different, to change their schema, for the Black body not to elicit fear in white adults? And so, you know, it is challenging and sometimes heart-wrenching to be in this space and to know that my children, just by virtue of how they look, there will be a lot of assumptions placed on them that are negative, despite their brilliance, despite their capability, and particularly when I think of my son. And so, you know, I think all folks that look like me, this is part of our reality, but having to tend to that on a daily basis, it's, you know, it can tire you out. So I'm big on self-care and doing the things that they build resiliency and not allow trauma to deteriorate everything.
Thank you. Kate, what problem do you wake up to every morning?
Yeah, well, I think when we were planning this panel, I'm so appreciative of Kali, because she wanted to discuss this and she wanted to contextualize how our different lived experiences would be. And my answer is going to just do just that. So for me, the biggest problem that I feel like I wake up and do in the morning is, you know, I don't have that experience of worrying about racism every day. You know, and so one of the things I would say the problem I wake up to every day is, how am I going to get it all done? It's you know, running a business and having a family and a dog that cries and a house to take care of, and all of those things. I think my experience is really more about how am I going to keep all of those plates spinning and keep them from dropping, at least in a catastrophic way.
Yeah, great. I just want to say we got a comment from Danielle saying, I totally agree. Even with attending these meetings, I find myself the only woman of color in attendance. So thank you, Danielle, for coming. It's great to have you here. Nita, what problem do you wake up to every morning?
Well, I think a lot. I think that there is so much. There's so much going on, and when you just feel that things are on a smooth roll, something else has hit, and that's been true the last year, with COVID and the businesses getting, we work so hard and our businesses work so hard to get to a point of where they have actually started making money and earning and supporting their family. And then when something like this hits, everything shuts down. I mean, it's just not myself, but I think all our team, the whole staff at MESO, it has been a difficult year. And I think we wake up with how can we help our entrepreneurs survive what's going on, and how do we make the policymakers and the government and the state and the city and the federal government, how do we make them understand the plights of small businesses? As MESO is mostly serving minorities and our team is mostly minorities, we do feel our voices are not heard many times. And or if they are heard, it is just like a sideline. And how can we do better in making sure that our words are heard? And very much like what Kali says is we have to go the extra mile to prove ourselves and to be accepted. And how can that be easier so we move forward? I think that's my biggest thought process in the morning.
Yeah. Liz.
Yeah, so I got a little overeager, I guess, in my introduction and in foreshadowing of one of the problems that I wake up to every day, which again is just kind of the state of the fashion industry and how poorly the lack of transparency and kind of treatment for global garment workers, also women and girls across the globe. So kind of the core reason that we started and exist, and a core part of our mission today, as I mentioned, is just creating educational and economic opportunity for women across the globe. And in every country that we work in, it looks different. But for, in Uganda, for instance, only about 22% of school-aged girls are actually in school. Globally, there are 730 million people that live in extreme poverty. There are over 40 million people that we would not consider free, that are in some sort of bondage, whether that is the commercial sex industry, whether that is through forced labor. And our industry in fashion and manufacturing represents a pretty big part of that. So really kind of waking up each day saying, how do we address both of those problems? A lot of these really, really extreme issues like forced sexual labor, for example, stem from just lack of opportunity, right? That if there aren't viable ways to earn a fair and dignified wage for folks, that this kind of cycle of vulnerability, you can rescue people out of the sex trade over and over and over again. But at the end of the day, if they can't take care of themselves and their families because the systems don't allow for it, and treat them with dignity and respect, that cycle of vulnerability really is going to continue. So thinking about how we create opportunities and pathways specifically for women and girls in developing economies to pursue their education and ultimately become leaders in their communities, because there's definitely an acknowledgement and a deep belief within myself that it's the women and girls in these places around the world that are going to step into leadership and that are going to lead us to where I think collectively we want to go. And so how do we build a global community that really supports that? And then I'll say, how do we do that in a way that is truly mutually beneficial and dignifying and honoring, and to kind of touch on both Nita and Kali's points of racism here in America. I think if we're just going to be very real and go there, one of the challenges that I wake up to every day is like, how do I build a community of people that, for me here in the United States, is a majority, probably white community, to show up and advocate for a majority Black and brown production and manufacturing force around the globe, who are very comfortable with advocating, let's say, on behalf of a Black woman in Uganda who doesn't have access to education, but a lot less comfortable saying like, hey, what does this look like in my own city, in my own town? What are the ways in which we are dehumanizing Black and brown people in our own communities? And it might look different, but all of a sudden that becomes a very hot topic and very politicized. And so really navigating, like, how do we build a community of folks that are awake to just the different ways in which every country, every people group, I think one of the, we all have our own ish, and it's really easy to look all the way across the world and say, look how bad it is over here. Let's do something. I also think we can run into the problem of saying like, well, it's so bad here. Why do you care about things over there? Right. And so this complexity of how do we build a really truly global community that is building something that, a tide that lifts all ships, if you will. That's really complex work, especially in the time and the era that we're living in. So these are the things that keep me awake at night.
Yeah, I mean, these are important things. And I think all of you talk about systemic change or transformation. And I think the time is now. We've been conditioned over hundreds of years that this is the way life is, but I think we're waking up and becoming more conscious and seeing like, hey, no, it doesn't. We can actually transform this. We can create what we want it to be. And yeah, it's super hard work. So that leads into our next question. It's about like, what are you all tolerating now? Is there anything holding you back from your next level of success? Kate, you're up.
Yeah,
You're in the hot seat.
I'm in the hot seat. So yeah, and this is going to be kind of a long roundabout way to get to the answer, but just kind of playing on some of the things we've been talking about here is that one thing that we all are living in these interesting times, and I have become incredibly aware of how the legal system encodes and supports a lot of the institutional racism. The sort of what we talk about at Catalyst is we want to do power together instead of power over. And that is not the way the legal system is generally set up. And so I think as we've been mentioning, we're all we've grown up in this culture that is, we've all been socialized to think, man, woman, child, dog, or employer, employee, or white people, people of color. And so what I think is really hard is, and who I am in that is I'm a woman, right? And so I've been sort of socialized, it's still pretty high on the ladder, and I recognize that, but it's still beneath men. And so what my tendency tends to be is when I'm interacting with someone, I think I tend to take that sort of subordinated role. That tends to be where I go when there's, when there's stress. And so what I think that ends up looking like to me is a lot of people pleasing, a lot of going along, a lot of avoiding conflict, being nice. And I think, so to answer the question, I think that is part of what has held me back. And I think the flip side, as I think about, I think we've all sort of mentioned is how do you create a system? We all know what we don't want. And what I feel really challenged and excited about is what does it look like to create something that we do want? And so I think in my mind, there's that stopping that people pleasing, stopping being nice, and learning to hold people accountable, and being really comfortable that you can do that in a way that doesn't demean them, and understanding the difference between accountability and punishment. And sort of really, so my big idea, I guess, is sort of coming up with a system where we all are free to choose. The way we interact with each other is based on full information and informed consent. And the only way that works is if we are able to hold each other accountable. So long-winded answer to say the thing that has held me back is my own sort of tendency to be a people pleaser. And to not hold others accountable when there's an agreement that's been broken.
Yeah. Nita, Liz, Kelly, anything to add to that? Any differences for you all?
I think I thought a lot about this question, and as I'm aging, what I've seen is that I don't tolerate much anymore. In the last 15, 16 years, I feel like that's the big shift that has come in the in how I work, in how I advocate for the principles and the beliefs and MESO's mission and the people that we support. I don't tolerate much anymore. I stand up to what I think is the right thing for the people we serve. And it's such a good feeling. And I hope everybody gets there, or, if they are there, to really honor that, because I've been able to accomplish a lot more in the last 2 or 3 years. And, I see reaction when I'm in meetings and those, any of those things that I see people either thinking, oh no, she's there, she's going to say something, or I see that, okay, I'm going to advocate correctly for, what we believe that has worked for people. And it's just great to not have to butter up anyone. And it's just great to stand up for the things that you believe in, and ask for those. And if you don't get it, you walk away. Yeah, so I guess it's the age thing. For me, it was the age thing. I had to get to certain level of safety and security to be able to do that. And yeah, so I don't tolerate much.
I'll hear a lot about, I can stand up for someone else, but it's hard for me to stand up for myself, and so I think I applaud you, like you're doing it both, and that's what we should all be doing and aiming for. So yeah. Liz, Cully, anything to add to that? What are you tolerating right now?
Yeah, I think honestly, just probably a sense of overwhelm, like being able to have, I think one of the challenges of social enterprise is that it does, we've chosen this path where there are two bosses, if you will. One is our kind of ideological, missional belief, and the other one is like running a business where you can pay your employees every month, and you can, meet payroll and hopefully be profitable at the end of the year. And that's really challenging. And I think I started out 10 years ago with the belief that purpose and mission actually drives value, and that they aren't necessarily intrinsically opposed. And I still believe that, like a decade in, I deeply believe that purpose drives value in the long run. That doesn't mean that the mental and emotional taxation of kind of, here's who we want to be in the world, and here are these big, like, missional, purposeful things that we want to achieve, and the day-to-day just like grind of keeping your business afloat don't combine together to be quite a substantial emotional and mental taxation and burden. And so I would say, yeah, probably just that. And celebrating small wins, I think, is a big thing. That it's just like, as idealists and dreamers about how much better the future could be, and people that I think see the real gaps in our current system and world and the injustices, and it's easy to get really overwhelmed by that. So continuing to fight to have a spirit of celebrating progress where it does exist, versus always only seeing the gaps, because again, that can be really emotionally like taxing. So cultivating that like discipline of celebrating progress and small wins along the way as well.
Yeah.
I think when I got this question, I was thinking more tactical than personal. So my My answer was really focused on constraints within the nonprofit sector specifically to be entrepreneurial, and how hard it is to access sort of innovation capital. I think people want to feel good. A lot of you tend to get money from philanthropy or people giving, and they want to support program. They want to, or now there's more because of the pandemic, where people wanting to support general operations. There are not a lot of people saying, I want to invest in innovation. I want to invest in your next great idea that can take your organization to the next level. And because I'm an entrepreneur, I have many of them. And it's very hard to get seed funding when you're in the nonprofit space, probably because there's not the same return on investment. So I'm constantly trying to figure out, how do I actualize for people that there is a return on the investment. It's more of a societal return than a money in your pocket return. But if you don't allow entrepreneurs who happen to be social entrepreneurs in the nonprofit sector to innovate, you really limit the power of what they have to offer, whatever it is they're doing. And they have to be allowed to fail too. But I've often thought, like, my next venture will be in the private sector, because at least then I can innovate with more nimbleness than I can in the nonprofit. And I feel like I tolerate that partially because I just don't know how to disrupt it exactly. If I knew a way, I would. But that was sort of, and I think of how many people I know who are like me in the nonprofit space, and how much more our community as a whole, collective Portland Metro community, could thrive if we were given the opportunity to really actualize some of the ideas we have. So.
Yeah, great. I've had that experience too. I've worked in nonprofits and for-profits, and I've kind of toggled back and forth, and have found that same thing in the nonprofits, and have been more comfortable working in for-profits because of that reason. Yeah. Nita, I have a question for you from our audience, and it's how do we encourage young women to stand strong at the outset?
Yeah, I wish I knew what I know now. I wish I had known several years ago, and that's true for everyone. And I think, but what I tell my children is to have at least one social thing that you are doing outside your own personal life that you strongly believe in, and just focusing on that belief and that principle, and seeing the impacts for it and trying to make change. I think it's this long-term thing, instead of going from one thing to another. If it's education, or if it is entrepreneurship, or if it is just empowerment that you want to give to people, but just staying strong with that. And of course, it's the whole society and the whole village and your whole people who surround you is going to make you stronger. I really think MESO team has done that for me. So, starting with parents believing in the child and supporting the child, and to bring all the resources to make their idea good and great and wonderful. And I think that, to me, it's really critical, making our children strong, to believe in themselves and believe in what they believe in, and to bring the resources to make it happen.
Yeah. Thank you. Kate, Liz, Kelly, anything you want to add to that? To how do we encourage young women to stand strong from the onset?
Yeah, I will answer that question with a belief that I've always held, but now as a mom of 2 and soon to be 3 boys, I want to introduce the concept that it's teaching young women to stand up. The critical part of the conversation is teaching our young boys to listen and to respect. I think so often the conversation is framed around, how do we teach women to do better? How do we teach them to be more confident? Like, there's women's issues, and it's women's responsibility to make women more of this or more of that. And I think we're missing a huge piece of the puzzle when we say, okay, how do we raise boys who are emotionally intelligent, who are empathetic, who are curious, who understand and know and believe that they are also beloved, human beings. But that, it's like I talk about informed consent with my 2.5-year-old, and deeply believe as a boy mom that it is on me to make sure that I'm raising boys that will turn into young men that are also contributing to a societal environment, where the question doesn't always come back to how do we help young girls be more confident, but also how do we help young boys be co-creators of a more just and equitable system and world. So that's my current point of view, and my I would say now a very strong with 3 boys under my own roof, a calling for me. So it's fun. I feel like I get to spend my day job asking the question about women and girls, and then all of my other waking hours thinking about how we bring boys and raise up boys to contribute to that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. That it's society, it's men and women together working on this. And I can remember this was years ago, but the president of the Nike Foundation, which was focused on empowering adolescent girls in the developing world, would talk to male CEOs of big companies, and they would kind of brush her off as soon as she said, girls empowerment, and said, "Oh, you should talk to my wife." And we thought, well, yeah, we'd love to talk to your wife, but we really want to talk to you too, because you're the one who has all, access to all the resources and funding. So you need to be a part of this as well.
Yeah, I want to just underscore that 100%. And I think I was listening to a podcast with a woman who was saying, issues of race and diversity are not a people of color problem. It's a white supremacy problem. And so white people need to figure out how to deal with their own racism. And I would say the same with patriarchy. Like, that is a problem that is perpetuated and oppresses our females in society. I also, though, would say, I think we operate too much in isolation. And throughout my career, I have found talking to other women to be extremely helpful. And I wasn't raised in the generation where everyone was getting a mentor. I feel like that's more common now. I don't know that it has to be formal mentoring, but hearing the stories and listening and talking to other women it's very strengthening. It sort of roots you. And, in my culture, people talk a lot about the ancestors and learning from the ancestors. And I find just even sometimes reading nonfiction, the story of other women and their journeys, like, that is empowering as well. So knowing, like, we're not the first woman to be in this situation, we won't be the last, like, sometimes that knowledge, it can strengthen you. And so I would tell any young woman who is entering the workplace, find more women. And they don't even have to be in the same industry, because, like racism, patriarchy is real and it's everywhere. And you're going to face the barriers, and women of color face somewhat, and depending on the color, like an Asian woman's experience is not the same as a Black experience. And so just having conversations is helpful.
One of my favorite studies, just to add on to this, about women and girls and their confidence levels, looked at girls, I think between the ages of kind of 9 and 12, and asked these questions of, like, how confident they were, what they thought their possibilities were for their future, and looked at all of these different factors, right? Like education, does the mom work? Does she stay at home? Like, so many different social factors. And the thing that they found that was the most powerful indicator for a young woman's kind of level of confidence and her sense of possibility in her future career opportunities was how much time she saw the male child caregiver in her home participate in home activities, doing the dishes, right? And so it's just like, we can spend all of this time like programming and policy, all of it's very important, but it's also like, do the damn dishes in front of your kids and show that you're not above that. And like, we can create a revolution. And so again, that comes back to like, making sure that we're not pushing off the responsibility for oppression onto the marginalized, whether that's from a gender perspective, whether that is from a race perspective, but really making sure we're involving the other half of the conversation, even though sometimes it's not that sexy and it comes down to just doing the dishes. Pardon my French.
Julia, can I just add something?
Yeah.
So I come from a very patriarchal family. I come from India, and dad ruled, and mom did what dad needed, and said. And so we were three daughters, and my mom really sat back and looked at it, that this is not how I want my children's future to be. And she made us so strong. I mean, she broke barriers in whatever she could manage. It wasn't, everything wasn't great, but she broke some barriers. And I really think parents play a big role in starting to make girls, and of course, having boys supported. But it was really my mom who kind of led us to where we needed to be. And then in return, then I do a little bit more for my own girls. And so I think that cycle has to happen in girl empowerment.
Yeah, thank you.
Along those lines, I also have boys, and so I love what Liz said about teaching them about informed consent. I'm also working with them about, learning what that means and everything. And I think then about myself and what would have been helpful for me to hear. I also loved what Kali said about talking to other women. I think I would encourage girls to pay attention to their own needs. I mean, I think, again, we're all socialized. A lot of us are socialized to pay attention to what does everybody else need? What does everybody else want? And then on the flip side of that, making it okay to do self-care, making it okay to take a rest when you're tired, making it okay to say no sometimes, making it okay to set those boundaries. I think I don't have daughters, but if I did, I think that's what I would be encouraging them to do.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on to a new kind of area, I'm curious, what is the one thing you have changed your mind about since starting your business or organization? Who would like to go first? Liz, you haven't gone first, I don't think, so you're up.
No, I was hoping this wouldn't be the one you called on me for.
It always works out that way.
I think probably, I think I will probably refer to it as as maybe purity culture, in the sense of learning to be okay. Again, I think maybe with progress, and by purity, I mean kind of ideological purity. I think back in my early days, there was kind of this sense that it was like, if you wanted to be a part of what I was doing, you had to agree with this 30-point manifesto about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And like, just gave people way too much information. And, I think had unrealistic expectations on how to build community and build critical mass and participation. And I think probably have changed my mind and said, I'm more interested in building bridges and thinking critically about how progress actually happens, which I personally don't believe happens in a silo or a bubble, getting more and more further over here and having a maybe smaller group of people that agree with me 100% on 100% of the points, and instead saying, like, how do we actually collaborate and come to the table with different ideas, even though it's really challenging. And that, yeah, I think that that's something that I've probably shifted and changed my mind on a little bit of how we actually create change in culture.
Yeah. Nita, what about you? What's one thing that's changed? You've changed your mind about?
I think it's everything I do, I feel is temporary. I feel like I know I had this mindset, everything is temporary in the world, like I'm temporary in the world, like, so you go with that idea. And I think if I had anything to change, is to know that MESO is permanent. And how do you build an organization that is going to last through decades? If anything, I think I would have done that differently and not thought, oh, I'm here another year, oh, I'm here 2 years, or 5 years, and to sit back and see that, wow, MESO has gone on and on and on, and maybe I should have had this system in place, or it would have been easier for the next person coming on board. But I think, yeah, that mindset of like, you are temporary in the world, but really you're almost permanent, or you leave things permanently behind. I think that's been a big thought process.
Yeah. Once I got advice of if you set out to do something, think big and then think bigger. Always think bigger. So you have your starting place, but make sure you're even going bigger than that. Is good advice. Kali, what is one thing you've changed your mind about?
This is a hard one for me. I think on a personal level, I'm naturally somewhat of an introvert, not somewhat. Like as a kid, I was a really shy child and very introverted and didn't really want to be out there at all. And I think in the process, particularly of my helping to start and sort of build Kairos, I find I really do love people, and more than I thought I did. And I have learned the value of vulnerability. When I started, I would have said vulnerability is weakness, and you don't show your cards, you protect yourself at all costs. I don't need to be close with people. I just need to do my job. And I think, I'm in my early 40s, and looking back on my career, I think I missed out on some meaningful relationships and better decisions because I was unwilling to be vulnerable. I was unwilling to sort of show the person of who I am, and felt very much I had to just be professional and strict and not and Kairos has sort of transformed the way I orient myself as a leader. And I've learned that vulnerability is strength, and that you can't transform hearts and mind unless you're willing to show your heart and mind, and that people have always something to teach you and help you grow. And it's okay to show what you don't know. And I think part of it is being a Black woman, I think as Nita said, people don't expect you to be smart. So you have to always prove. There's this feeling of always having to prove. So I never would admit a mistake or not knowing something, but and maybe it's just getting older and tired. It's I don't know all this stuff. I'm not even going to pretend. It's exhausting. And it's so much more freeing to be more of my whole person. And I have been so richly blessed. And it's been a gift in my life, this journey, because I've been willing to be more vulnerable. So that, and I tell you, just a small story, my co-founder was a big fan of Brene Brown. And she wanted me to read the book, and both of us co-founders to read the book. And in the second year of our existence, and I was okay, I'll try it. And then I was what does she write about? She said vulnerability. And I was oh, hell no. Why would I read a book about vulnerability? I had no time to waste on that. And I really was you've lost your mind. I love you, but there is not a chance. And then I happened to hear her speak, and it blew my mind. And subsequently we had our whole staff read her book Daring Greatly. And it's just that has been a huge 360 for me. So
Yeah.
Long answer.
Kate, do you have something that you'd like to add?
Yeah. So I would say one of the things that I've changed my mind about is we grew really, really fast. We went through a period of 3 years where we almost doubled revenue every year. And it felt really good, and it felt really exciting. And we could point to that top line revenue and say, we're succeeding. And then a pandemic hits, and you're sort of wow, there's some things we really need to go back and shore up. And so I think one of the things that I've changed my mind about is growth is great. I'm not necessarily saying don't go for the growth. You definitely need that top line revenue, but also be paying attention to I feel like it's also really, really important to pay attention to the core of the organization, the foundation of the organization. How are you going to keep it, to Nita's point, how are you going to keep it sustainable so it can last forever? It's really fun when the numbers are going up, and then it's not so fun when something happens that destabilizes you.
Yeah, great. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. I do want to ask our panelists one more questions before we go to the Q&A, and I see one or two questions in the chat, so we'll get to those. So the last question I want to ask is, what would be the best thing and the worst thing for you about getting what you want? Who wants to start? I think everyone's gone once now, so who wants to start? Or I will choose.
I can go.
All right, great, thanks.
I think at least to talk about the best thing, I think having mentor, MESO's co-founder, Sanford Maddox, he was my mentor. And I think that was the best thing for the organization, best thing for the community, best thing for me, to have that guide over the year that you totally trust and you feel secure in them, and you know they will take you to the highest, they will challenge you, and then they'll also support you. I think that mentorship has been extremely influenceable for me. And that's been the best thing for MESO. I think the worst thing, I think it's what Kate says, is like growth. Like MESO has grown, like we have not stopped growing. And I think having that planning, that you will grow and what will you need for that time. I think that we went through that struggle for a couple of years, and that was very, very difficult and very challenging. Yeah. I mean, we say that to our entrepreneurs, that you're going to grow, so plan for access to capital. And then you, within your organization, you also have to look at those things that you are going to grow. So.
Yeah.
I'll go. I think the thing that feels most fun and exciting, in addition to obviously like the obvious answer, I feel like, okay, as our organization grows, our impact grows, right? We create more dignified, fair wage jobs. We get to invest in female scholars. On a probably more selfish personal level is like, I love the people I get to meet and hang out with and be friends with. It's just so awesome. Like, I feel so lucky by, just how my world intersects with all kinds of different people in different industries that are dreaming really big and doing really challenging, cool things in the world. And knowing that as we continue, to grow, that just the access that you have to other really cool people who are doing cool stuff in the world is really cool. It's really fun. And I feel very enriched by a lot of those relationships and challenged and encouraged. I'd say probably, the downside would just be, or the thing I'm probably most scared of is probably just like, as the stakes get higher, the pressure gets higher. And I think the standard for, again, probably perfection. And I think women really specifically, I think we have a very unfair standard for successful women that our society has still not caught up with. And I think, if I'm being really honest, I want to be Nita. This is what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be Nita, and I want to say, like, F that. I don't care what you think. I don't care if you think I'm this or that. And I'm probably just not quite there yet, that it's like the judgment that I think specifically women in leadership and successful women in leadership, and the standard for kind of perfection, and the lack of grace for being a human who's also successful and growing and thriving, I think still kind of scares me. It's like, I don't want that. I don't want to have to deal with that. And I definitely can find myself being like, do I really want to be that successful? Because it might come with all of these other things. this pressure and expectation that like, I don't want, and like wishing that I could cultivate this life where it was like from 8 to 5. I had that and that was fine, but then I could like turn it off and just go live like a simple, quiet life where nobody expected anything of me until 8 o'clock the next morning. And unfortunately, I think when that's not how the world works, and that kind of scares me, and it's something that I wish you could separate out from success. I don't know if you can.
I'll go. I think the thing that would be best for me would be, I feel like part of my personal mission is to figure out a way to lead an organization, whether that's my family here at home or business, in a way that opens a space for everyone who's a part of it to get what they need, thrive, grow. And so I think the best thing, if I were able to do that, is I would prove to myself that it's possible. I mean, I think that there's a question in my mind: is it possible? Is it possible to create that kind of an organization, and also, pay the bills, all the things that go along with that. My fear is, I'm also an introvert, Kali, and so I think for me, there's a lot of, if that were to happen, if we were to succeed and get really big, there's some stuff for me around being seen. So on the one hand, I think part of what I'm fearful of, sort of to riff off what Liz was saying, is being seen and being misunderstood. I mean, I think that women in our society in particular, if you are a strong woman, if you do say what you think and what's on your mind, there's an extent to which you pay a price. And the example that comes to mind is AOC, and how she's just been vilified by so many people for saying what, when I hear her, my thinking is, oh, that's kind of interesting. I haven't thought about it that way. But then, just to see that she gets so just hated, that's scary to me. And I think there's a level of misunderstanding of I think that you can become a lightning rod for everybody's misunderstandings and misconceptions if you are seen in that way. And then on the flip side, I think about, in my mind, good leadership means that people don't think about you at all. And so there's also a flip side of, working really hard to create this organization and this environment where everyone is doing well and thriving, and they don't even know you're there. And I honestly, I think that's success, is when things are going so smoothly that people don't even, they're not even aware of what you're doing as the leader. And that I do have a little bit of an ego that says, well, that kind of sucks. I'm working my tail off to be, not be seen. So for me, there's a lot of stuff around being seen and what does that mean? Yeah.
And I'll try to go quick because I know we're about at time, but I'd say best for me is easy. Kairos focuses on the rehumanization of children in education, and it's something I believe every child needs, every school should do. So if we were able to scale our model, success, the best thing would be being able to scale what we do in every school in this entire country, maybe beyond, in the world. Because when children know that they are seen and valued, it has a radical impact on their ability to thrive and their ability to be successful academically as well as socially and emotionally. And so hands down, that would be the best thing ever. And I think our society would change in such a radical way if we were able to do this for children. I have no question that we would reap a benefit as a country if we could do this. And I think a lot of what we see in terms of negative behaviors is an outgrowth of children not being seen, not being valued, being othered for a variety of reasons. So that is the best thing. And I think the worst thing has been said already. I think with that would be a lot of attention. And I don't love that I don't love the attention I get now. Sometimes it's exhausting. And for me, it's not even fear of criticism, but it's just exhausting. I can't explain it. It's just, I definitely don't get energy from attention or for being out there. And so that would be hard, but it'd be worth it. I mean, we all have to make sacrifices. To me, it would be worth it just to see children thrive. So
Thank you. Thanks. It's 1 o'clock, and there was one question from the audience that I'd love Liz to address before we jump off. And it's, what do we do about the companies who are greenwashing?
Oh, well, I think, I mean, just attempting to be as informed of a consumer as possible. Like at the end of the day, our dollars count, right? And so it becomes more confusing, of course, as more and more companies want to participate in the conversation. And so I think attempting to just be an informed consumer, I think brand loyalty and having a few brands that you really like rely on and trust and know a lot about, and kind of building your like purchasing habits around that and staying really informed in that way, because it can be really, really overwhelming. But there's also a lot of great resources, and I can potentially follow up with consumer advocacy groups and apps that you can download to kind of help you understand more of kind of the true story. There's different, campaigns, whether that's through things like amazing organizations, whether that's B Corp or multiple fair trade organizations, or different standards where it's like people are doing the hard work for you, to kind of actually to look and see, like, legitimately under the hood, are these companies participating and at least moving in the right direction? And it's a great gift to be able to kind of rely on some of those communities, because as consumers, obviously it can be very difficult because there's a lot of information and a lot of smoke and mirrors. But I will also say, as an eternal optimist, that it's like, I think it's saying something that greenwashing is a problem. We can also say it's progress, in the sense of what that shows us is that companies know that consumers are starting to ask and to demand for higher standards, right? That the industry is shifting. So there is this sense that there is value in us at least espousing these ideals, which I think is a great movement from where we've come maybe, 20, 25 years ago, where companies would say, no, our only goal is to make our shareholders happy, and at any cost. And so at least maintaining a sense of hope, that there's some peer pressure and good movement towards companies expanding their definition of what it means to be responsible.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. If any questions do come up, you can email me, julia@catalystlawllc.com, and I can make sure that those questions get answered. This has been really wonderful. I think this is a great time for us to work together, to come together as a community and transform the way that we do things for the better. So thank you very much. And thank you to Nita, Kali, Liz, and Kate. You all are awesome people. Keep doing the great work. It's so needed and so appreciated. So thank you very much. And have a great Friday and a happy weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.